I'd like to introduce Julie Greene. And she is a candidate, a Democratic candidate, running for Heather Edelson's seat, 50A. Um, and we're just going to ask her some questions. And if you want to, again, put any questions you might have in the chat. So let's start. Julie, can you share a little bit about yourself and what made you decide to run for state rep?
Sure. Thanks so much, Colleen. I appreciate that. And thanks to everyone for being here, even all the way from Hawaii. I really appreciate that. I'm thrilled to be running for the State House. And I hope this next half hour gives everyone here a chance to really get to know me and an understanding of who I am and why I think I'm qualified and ready to be your next rep. I think it's important to know that this isn't a decision that I took lightly. I love our community. I love Edina. I find that here we care deeply about one another and wanting one another to succeed. And that's really important to me. And that's kind of what drives a lot of my work. I grew up in Chicago, in a suburb outside of Chicago, I should say. And there was a mantra growing up in my house that my parents had that was, we contribute to make things better. And I believe it's even more true now than ever before. And they talk to us about the importance of speaking up for others, and then doing what we can and not sitting on the sidelines. So 18 years ago, my husband, John, and I moved to Edina, and we knew right away that we had landed somewhere special in Minnesota. We could see quickly that public education was valued. Civic engagement is just what you do here. And then this idea of community was really at the heart of living and how people live their lives. So we planted our roots, invested our energies, and we've been raising our 4 kids up and through the Edina Public Schools. I've got 2 in college, a junior and senior. I have a senior at Edina High School ready to graduate. And then I have an 8th grader going into the high school next year. So we have a busy household, but also very fun and lively. So in 2019, I have to be honest that I surprised myself when I decided to run for the Edina School Board. I had been one of the co-organizers for the referendum campaign. And during that time, there was a significant, well-funded, concentrated effort in Edina, if many of you remember, to kind of undermine our schools. There were glossy magazines showing up at our houses with this threat of the failure of public schools and really a lot of unfounded accusations on indoctrination of our students and a lot of misinformation flying around. So having a front row to that seat, what I was seeing was fracturing our community. And I mean, of course, our schools always have room to grow, and they will continue to. But that intense message was really threatening our public school system and really straining the core of Edina. So I felt like you could feel it everywhere. You could feel it on social media. You heard it at the grocery store. Neighbors were talking about this. And so I decided I was going to run for the board. And that was 4 years ago. So I just rolled off my term a few weeks ago. And I will say, serving on the Edina School Board, it has been challenging, but very important and very meaningful work, even with the pandemic thrown in there. Our board, including others across the country, really had to make some very tough decisions during that time. And no matter what we decided to do as a board, in the heart of the pandemic, we knew we were going to anger a large group of people. It didn't matter what decisions we were going to make. We were so polarized during that time. And I felt like it was really critical to lead with confidence and to lead with hope. And that is something that I've intentionally done throughout my term. And I'm really proud of that work. So if I am elected to serve in the Capitol, I plan to serve with the same conviction that I have over the last 4 years and all of my leadership roles in the community before that. I really believe that our laws need to reflect our community's priorities and needs, and we need to really connect the dots between legislation and what's going on here at home in our community. I think more voices at the table will always impact better decision-making and outcomes. This is true every time, no matter what the issue is or the topic. And then third, I think that we have a responsibility to make sure that we are drafting legislation that is values driven and accountable to taxpayers. And I think the funding piece is a really important part of being in the legislature. And I have worked really hard as on the school board to really understand the complexities of public education funding and other issues too. So that's a little bit about me, just to introduce myself. So I will pass it back over to Colleen.
Well, I think you've, my next question, you've answered it partially, but I will ask it anyway. If there's any other information you'd want to give, what qualifications and experience would you bring to your role as House representatives? Do you think you've answered that?
I'd like to add a little bit more to that. I think it's really important to have a balance of both qualifications and experience. Being in public office really calls for both. My professional background, so my paid background, I did get paid to be on the school board, but it was minimal, which is fine. It was a volunteer role, but my paid background is in brand strategy, marketing, and communication work, and I've been doing that for like the last 3 decades. I worked for consumer products companies. I work with some small startups now, helping them bring products to the marketplace, supporting them in marketing and brand work. So that's what I do over on the side. The other thing that I have been very involved in is TEDx Edina. And I'm not sure if any of you have been able to attend one of our events over the last 7 or 8 years, but that work has been, it's a volunteer role that I do, but I take it very seriously. One of the great things in terms of experience is really working with partnerships throughout the district or throughout the city. We have private partnerships that have helped to sponsor us, TCO, Evereve. We curate speakers from around the community. And that work has really been such an inspiration to hear people share and be brave enough to share their great ideas and curiosity and ways of thinking about the world and really trying to change things. I highly recommend going to an event the next time it comes around. The other thing I want to talk about just for a minute too is my experience on the board. So as on the school board, I was vice chair. On top of that, I was also chair of our policy committee and chair of our legislative action committee, both very hands-on roles on the board. I thought I would give an example of what policy work on the board looks like. It's really the bridge between the legislation that gets passed and how it rolls out in the district. On top of that, it's also, school districts have local control over how.
I can't hear anything.
Excuse me. Could you put yourself on mute? Okay, Julie, go on.
Yeah, no, but I just want to explain that it's really that bridge. And I was chair of policy, and like one of the things that we did, one of the first things I did when I got in is we really looked at our policy. We have a policy on how to make policy, and to me, that was the most important policy that we worked on, or that I worked on, because it really set the stage and changed the tone for how we evaluate policies. And what we did was we really wanted to get to the root of implementation of policies that we would bring forward. So we developed a framework. It was an equity framework, and we brought in multiple voices. We developed a diversity and equity advisory council that would then look at our policies and give feedback. We brought in students, we brought in teachers. We really opened up the door to our policy work, which I think really translates to what goes on and what should go down at the Capitol. The other thing that I will say is legislative action committee chair. I really harness both student and parent voice and spent a lot of time lobbying at the Capitol for budgetary increases for our school system. It really involved a lot of extensive knowledge of how our state government works, and it really helped me build relationships with a lot of the individuals at the state government level. So I just thought I would bring that in as well, some more kind of the details of what board work looked like for me.
Julie, there's going to be a lot of issues that you work on. Do you have a focus of what issues are most important to you?
That's a great question, Colleen. Unfortunately, all the issues right now feel very important. And there's a lot of competition for that space to get them looked at. I will tell you that no matter what issue I am working on, I will dig in and do the necessary work. And what's interesting is what I heard and have heard over the past 5, 6 years in our community from students and parents is very reflective of what we all hear, all ages. And those are holding up our public school system, so education. Despite a lot of the massive gains that we made last session, which was fantastic, I still have concerns about where we're going to fall short in funding. I'm very concerned because I think if I were betting today, I would bet every school district in our state is going to have cuts this year. And that's concerning, considering the gains that we made. That's how far back we had gotten. That's one thing. The second thing is addressing mental health and that the growing mental health concerns. Just this last week, I'm not sure if anyone saw in the Star Tribune, they're doing a 3-part series on loneliness, and that's based on our U.S. Surgeon General declaring loneliness as a public health crisis. And that's a major contributor to mental health decline in our country. That is really close to my heart, and that is something that I think then stems into a lot of other issues and goes into healthcare and all sorts of other things. So again, going back to that root cause. The other thing that is, I think, extremely important to work on is our equality and our equity work. And I don't say this lightly, but I do think that we've passed things and we're moving in the right direction, but equality is a lot more than compliance. And I really want to look at making sure that what we're passing is actually translating to access and opportunity. So I'm going to give you a quick example of what I'm talking about here. So we just had this amazing historic opening of the Professional Women's Hockey League come to our state, right? It was jam-packed in there. And guess how many seats they had for those with disabilities? 0. And that was because the seating, they had closed the seating off. So the way they closed the seating off, they closed off every accessible avenue. So a woman in a wheelchair could not go and witness this historic event. So we're making gains, but those are the things that I think we really need to look at. And that's something that's close to my heart. And then, of course, 2 others that are working to really end gun violence. I'm part of Moms Demand. I've been engaged with them and bringing some of the education materials into the district the last 5 years. And then, of course, which is on the top of everyone's mind, is making sure we have a healthy planet for generations to come. And there's a lot of work to do in that area to just achieve our climate and environmental goals. We have some aggressive plans that I love and I support, but I want to make sure we have the funding and we're going to be able to achieve those. And how are we going to push on our private sector to make sure we get those things done? So,
Julie, there's going to be things got passed by a very small margin. And we don't know what's going to happen in this election. What are your thoughts on abortion and the timing that was passed in the past session?
that's a great question. I am 100% in support of women having complete control over their decisions on their body without government interference, period. I know it's a complicated issue, but the more we empower women and the more we empower our healthcare system to support women in making those decisions, the better we will be. And I think it's what our community and our country actually want. The majority of our country wants that. And that's what I think is important to make sure that we're leading our work with that in mind.
Are you aware of the wording of the ERA amendment at all?
Why don't you share it with me and I will let you know if
I don't have it here, unfortunately, but we're hoping that ERA gets passed this session.
Yes.
But if it doesn't, would you support the ERA?
Yes, I would. I would. It's interesting. I talked to Representative Joachim today. She represents our other side of Edina, and she said there's so much that was passed last session. I'm constantly keeping up with what everything means and everything. So, but yes, absolutely, and support. So
I think we have the Kit, is this the ERA wording?
That's the current proposed wording that I just got from a meeting with Gender Justice an hour ago.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Here it is. Shall the Minnesota Constitution be amended to say that all persons shall be guaranteed equal rights under the laws of the state, and that the state shall not discriminate against any person on account of race, color, national origin, ancestry, disability, or sex, including pregnancy, pregnancy outcomes, reproductive freedoms, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. Did I get that right, Kit?
You read that accurately. That's the wording that's proposed to be on the ballot. Now, who knows what?
Okay, and that's the ballot for this session, yes?
No, it's what has to happen is pass it out of the legislature and then it goes to the citizens. Probably in November of 26. I asked that. I said, are you going to do that this year? Are we going to do that this year? No, probably get it through the legislature this spring and to the citizens as a constitutional amendment in November
Right,
26th.
right. So, Julie, can you stand behind that?
100%. I would more than stand behind it. I would advocate for that. I would be working very hard to make sure we get that passed and part of our Constitution.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing that it's not already there. So
It is amazing. Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask some questions that we have 10 minutes, and we can ask some questions that are in the chat.
Yeah, hi, Julie, thanks so much for being with us today. We have a question from Winnie saying, Edina has recently discussed a single-family home sales tax of 0.5% for 500,000 and above. And today was a release on draft language by the DFL for 37 cents per 100 tax to create funding for home buyers, renters, and people facing housing insecurity. Which would you support and why? And I know we also had affordable housing is a key topic that was in our questions that we sent to you. Can you address this or share your ideas on how we can solve this problem or what your goals are?
yeah, let me just pull. I would have to look into the making the choice between the two options. I'd really need to listen a little bit more and read more into that. I feel like affordable housing is, where's my list here? You guys went out of order of what the list that you sent me. It doesn't matter.
Just trick you.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's all good. No, but I think affordable housing it's a complicated issue. I do think that the statewide tax that's coming that is planned to go into more affordable housing will have a big impact, and we'll have to see what that actually looks like on the ground and what that equates to. I feel like I need to do a lot of listening and learning and being in that phase and really meeting with the Edina affordable housing group and really learn more about what concerns are, how we make this happen for our constituents. The one thing that I want to remember too is that we have people at the heart of affordable housing. These are people's lives that we're talking about. So I always want to lead with that in all these conversations. So
This is one I kind of liked. Was there any legislation that was passed in the last session that you would have voted no?
that's a great question. Since I'm not having a vote on a omnibus bill, I can pull a piece of that out, right? And tell you what I would have voted no on.
You definitely
I can write the rules. Okay, so I will tell you this. In the education policy, it was passed that high schools need to require a civics requirement to graduate. a civics class. Great intention of that. Love it. They passed that though out of cycle with the social studies curriculum review and standards review that is due every 10 years. So and this is just in Edina, our high school social studies team has been scrambling to try and figure out how do we adhere to the law that went into effect. Because what they did with that too is they said you have to offer it in either 11th or 12th grade. So we lost that local control on what would work best for our school district. We have an amazing 9th grade AP government class at Edina High School. We send 400 to 500 kids every year to the Capitol with their teachers for this experience. It's a great way to get kids excited about social studies, about government, about civic engagement, right out of the gate, right into high school. And that went away with what they passed. So now we had to move our civics and government class to senior year, 12th graders, which I have a senior he's not as engaged his second semester senior year. He's already picked his major. He's 18, he's already voted. So that I would not have passed. And I fought hard to explain the implication, and it's costing our district money because we had to redo our curriculum because we had to move it to a 1-semester class. So that is one thing that I was not.
Well, it's the
Okay.
theoretical versus the practical.
Right. Great intention, but those are the connecting of the dots that I think we can do a better job of.
Okay, I'll
We
turn it
are,
back to you.
we have we're running out of time. We've got a couple minutes left, and one of the big topics that everybody's gonna be paying attention to this session is healthcare and providing solving some of the healthcare problems and insurance problems that a lot of Minnesotans are affected by. Colleen, I can't remember exactly the wording of the healthcare question that you had sent ahead of time, but
Mhm.
if you could speak about what your goals are for this very complicated issue, whether it's healthcare for all. We work with Healthcare for All Minnesota on lobbying issues around this. So
Yeah.
turning it over to you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jennifer. I would love to see us expand Minnesota Care as a public option and allowing any Minnesotan an option to buy in regardless of status. I think that is an important push. I know that is being talked about. And I know it's also very complicated, but I think it's an important part of that access piece and making sure that we are doing everything that we can so that everyone has access to quality healthcare. One thing I will say, one of the things that I've experienced since COVID, and I think COVID really exacerbated a lot of this and really shined light on a lot of inequities. But there are people of color and people with disabilities and those that are homeless, their chance of having long COVID is exponentially higher than someone who has access to healthcare. I have access, and I got COVID right out of the gate in April of 2020 and have now adopted chronic long-term health issues. I have asthma now. You can even hear it in my voice later at night and what that is. And that's what I'm dealing with. And I have access. So I can't imagine the ripple effect of us not having access for all the people in Minnesota to get help, especially coming out of COVID. So it's another one where I really need to listen and learn more about all the intricacies. I have secured the endorsement of Senator Elise Mann, who has led a lot of this legislation. And she is a fantastic teacher. I've been asking her a lot of questions and would hope to work with her under her wing a bit and just continue listening and learning and getting us to a better place in our state.
We
Thank
just have
you.
a couple more minutes. If
Yeah.
we will be saving these questions from this chat and sending them to you afterwards. We have everybody's email.
Oh, great.
It's because you've all registered. So thank you so much for that. And we'll be sharing them. So if there are unanswered questions, hopefully you can reach out to people. But would you put your email, your campaign email in the chat so people can send questions to you on their own as well, and any links that where people can learn more?
Sure, I will do that. I can't talk and type at the same time, so I'm just gonna put my my email and my website. I am seeking the DFL endorsement, as was mentioned earlier. So if any of you are planning on going through the caucus process and becoming a delegate, I would be super honored to have your support and your vote for endorsement at the convention. It really would be an honor to represent Bloomington and Edina at the Capitol. And I promise I will work very hard.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think people have a really good idea of what you stand for, and now we're going to have to say goodbye.
No, and
We
I had
should
one
really
other.
make this a 2-hour event. is
I
what we
know.
should do.
Do I have one more minute for another quick story?
You have 1 minute.
Okay, I'll go really quick. So I wanted to tell you, a couple weeks after I announced, I got an email or a text from a gentleman who had seen me when I ran for school board. He did not agree with anything and nothing that I had said. He had come to see me and had a lot to say, asked me a lot of questions and stuff. And after we met, I said to him, if I get elected, I promise you I'll work my butt off for your kid. And I kept in touch with him. I called him frequently. He actually called me one time to say, you did a good job tonight on this decision. Anyway, so I get this message from him a couple weeks after I announced, and it said, State House, really, are you gluten for punishment? But then he said, how can I help? And I just want to share that with you because that's how I work. And I just, that text means so much to me that I've really been able to reach across the aisle and make things happen and earn the trust and respect of others. So I'll leave you with that story.
Thank you very much, Julie. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Night, everyone.
We will be
And
inviting in
now we will
Alicia.
be talking to Alicia Gibson. Aha. Where are you, Alicia? There you are.
There she is.
Here is Alicia Gibson. Welcome. We are Edina Indivisible. We are
Indivisible Twin Cities now.
Hold on. We
Oh.
we are sponsoring this candidate, and we will soon be coming Indivisible Twin Cities, which is a collaboration of Edina Indivisible, St. Paul Indivisible, and Roseville Indivisible. It's great to have you here. We would like to hear a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for representative, state rep.
Yeah, hello. Thank you all so much. Thank you for hosting this, and thank you everybody who's on the call, spending your precious time learning more about this campaign. So my name is Alicia Gibson, and yes, I'm running to serve as the next House District 50A representative. When explaining who I am as a person, I like to talk about two people who have shaped who I have become. And first is my grandmother, who was a Japanese immigrant and who arrived in the United States in the decade following World War II. She was not only an outsider, she was considered by many an enemy alien, and she was treated as such. She was also an extremely talented and intelligent person whose life was really restricted in its options because she was a woman. So because of that, I know the traumas, the generational trauma that occurs from racial, ethnic, and gender discrimination. I also know the joy and the richness of meaning that comes from a childhood that is multicultural. And so I have, devoted my life to feminism, but also to creating a truly inclusive democracies. The second person is my dad, and this week is his birthday. So it's still birthday week over here for Daddy, and happy birthday. He raised 3 daughters on his own. His first career was as a social worker, and then in retirement, he started a second career as a therapist working exclusively with indigent clients. And I know because his example that men can support women fully and that they can take on caretaking roles. I also know that collectively we can make life better for each other. And more than that, it is our duty to do so. So I decided to run for representative because the enormity of the challenges that are facing us right now, facing climate crisis with 2 small young children, my renewed commitment to constitutional democracy when our nation's capital was invaded. I decided to run for this seat because I have been very active in the DFL, both as an outreach and inclusion officer, and now currently as the vice chair for the DFL Feminist Caucus. I know that I have the passion and the experience to make a difference.
Alicia, I just want to know a little bit about what do you think your qualifications and experience are that would make you a good House representative?
Yeah. So I have a background in diplomacy, law, academia, and classroom teaching. As a House representative, I'll be able to analyze complex systems, help find creative solutions, and build consensus for change. My first training is in peace and conflict resolution, and I lived in South Africa immediately after the fall of apartheid to understand how communities heal. Before COVID, I picked back up this part of my passion and started training in restorative justice. I want to use these skills to build bridges across our differences, to reestablish the norms of democratic discourse that relies on clarity of convictions, empathy for those who don't agree with you, and a commitment to good faith, honest persuasion. I also have a law degree, and while working on a self-designed environmental justice project in South Africa, I realized that globally access to resources is increasingly becoming the most urgent of our challenges. And so I went to the University of Colorado School of Law to gain an understanding and an expertise in environmental law and policy. So as a legislator, I will use my understanding of how laws are used in practice and how they are interpreted by courts to ensure that we are writing the best laws we can and to push forward climate action. I also went and earned a PhD in comparative literature and cultural studies after law school because I wanted to work with people and I operate best in collaborative spaces. And this is actually what brought me to Minnesota. And today I teach critical writing and reading skills at Minneapolis College of Art and Design. I will use this expertise to quickly synthesize a wide variety of systems and problems, and then work with stakeholders as a knowledgeable partner and as someone voters can trust to explain things to them in terms they can understand.
Thank you. You have to engage as a representative in many, many issues, but describe the issues that are your top priorities.
Yeah. You do have to engage in a wide variety of issues, and I have the training and the experience to do that. But at the end of the day, I want to be known as a legislator who is a champion for protecting the vulnerable and protecting the environment. Some current examples of this would include bringing a sense of urgency to increasing the number of school counselors. We currently have a ratio of 1 school counselor for every 738 students in the state, and the best practices call for 1 school counselor to 250. We also have a higher than national average rate of children being returned to abusive homes. And we are only one of 9 states in the entire country that has a patchwork system of county by county child protection. So these are just 2 examples of ways that we need to do better in protecting the vulnerable. And later, I hope that we will have more time to discuss the environment, but I want to mention now that I will bring a strong commitment to climate action. And I also want to be known as someone who actively works to build bridges across our social polarization, defending democracy and showing that Democrats are economically responsible and expand the middle class by growth through quality of life.
Okay, the ERA amendment may pass this term and get put on the ballot in 2026. Wow, I have to wait a long time. Will you, if it doesn't get passed, will you support it in the next term?
Oh, absolutely. And so as a vice chair of the DFL Feminist Caucus, I have been involved in these conversations with the stakeholders around kind of strategies and trying to understand, you know, the different ways that we can move forward. Right now, I think the original language, you know, did not explicitly reference reproductive rights or gender and gender issues, but that, you know, the good side about that is being able to get votes from across the aisle. Now, on the other hand, some of our stakeholders, they really want to put reproductive rights inside that constitutional amendment because it is so under attack in this country, and don't want to have any laws here undone in the future. That might be the best way to protect that right. And, you know, frankly, I am a team player. And however we all decide as stakeholders that we want to move forward with that language, I will support it.
Great. Do you support equal access to healthcare and other essential public benefits regardless of immigration status?
Yes, I support equal access to healthcare. So last session, among a long list of historic achievements was the expansion of Minnesota Care that made it possible for 50,000 more immigrants to access healthcare. And I am proud of our government for doing this.
What legislation would you propose to improve gun safety?
So the most important piece of legislation is one that I really hope is passed this session, and that is safe storage. We know that safe storage of guns in a home is the most important thing we can do to prevent children and youth from accessing weapons that kill them and their classmates. There's another great piece of legislation up right now, and that is one that is being pushed by our law enforcement partners, and that is a requirement to notify law enforcement about lost and stolen guns so that they can better track stolen weapons. And is a gun license process, much like we have with cars. Just like there's nothing inherently wrong with owning a car, but cars can cause a lot of damage when not used properly. There is nothing wrong with owning a gun, but we need to know that those who have access to guns are capable of using them safely.
Would you be surprised to know that safe storage of guns was the most contentious issue in the last session?
It's hard for me to believe. You know, I'm from Oklahoma, so I have friends and family who, you know, are Republican and Democrat. And I have Republican family members and friends who own a lot of guns and have children in the house, but they have them stored up and locked up. You know, that's the responsible thing to do.
I probably don't have to ask you if you support banning military style assault weapons in this state.
Yeah, I do. You know, these are not guns that are used to hunt, and hunting is a recreational activity that I know is a big part of many Minnesotans' lives that I, you know, respect. Assault weapons are notoriously inaccurate, and their main purpose is to expel, you know, a maximum number of bullets in a minimum amount of time. And you probably aren't going to be eating anything you happen to kill with an assault weapon.
Probably can't even find it.
Yeah, you're going to have to scrape it up and get it at home somehow.
What changes to campaign finance laws would you suggest to limit the impact of special interest money on politics?
So first, I just want to point out that last session, we had a lot of really amazing, terrific forward movement on this. And some of the laws that were passed is that we're now limiting foreign influence by prohibiting foreign corporations from contributing to candidates or political parties. We have a disclosure requirement for individuals donating $1,000 or more to PACs that support specific candidates. And we increase the amount that people can be reimbursed when utilizing the political contribution reimbursement system from $50 to $75. Building on those things, I think that we need laws that require full disclosure of all contributions that support elections communications. We have a really great public subsidy program that this campaign is committed to, and we can make it easier for donors to use by upgrading the system and making it electronic. We could make the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board independent of those that they regulate by establishing funding that is independent of the legislative budget process. And finally, we can pass a resolution asking Congress for a constitutional amendment that overturns Citizens United and ends the legal fiction that corporations are people.
That's, yeah. We'd all like that, I think. Which committee would you like to serve on and why?
All the committees. I'm ready. First, I would say that I would like to serve on one of the two Human Services committees and the Children and Families Finance and Policy, because one of my priorities, as I've stated, is protecting the vulnerable. Another one would be the Environment and Natural Resources. They also, there are two committees, and I'd be happy to serve on whatever is most needed, because my other priority is protecting the environment. And I would like to serve on the Higher Education and Finance and Policy Committee, because I do have a particular expertise in this field, and it is an area that is currently going through a lot of transition in our state.
Okay, Jennifer, how about you take over the chat?
Okay, we just, we want to make sure that we cover a couple questions that we covered with Julie at the beginning, and one of them is affordable housing. If you could speak about your goals in that area. We had a question that we'll be sharing all the questions with both of you afterwards, but one had a question specifically about raising taxes on in Edina and kind of statewide, but if to help fund this affordable housing. But if you could speak about your agenda on this topic, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, great. So last session, our legislators secured $1 billion in state funding for housing. And this includes a new rental voucher system, first generation home buyers assistance, which I'm particularly excited about, as well as a focus on workplace housing shortages. We also boosted funding for low-income seniors and other funding to help stabilize our senior housing sector. And for the first time, to kind of get to the question here, for the first time, we have a dedicated source of money for affordable housing from 0.25% 7-county metro area tax that will create a sustainable source of funding for affordable housing. That was kind of the point of that. So moving forward, I want to make sure that funding keeps pace so that we don't dig ourselves into another hole, especially areas outside of that 7-county special tax district. But for the immediate future, I would really like to see how this historic investment helps increase the amount of affordable housing we have in Minnesota and in our area, placing a priority on families with children and then plug in the holes. So I would say that I would really like to see how this money is going to be used, because there's a lot of money that has been injected into the system and we need to actually work to get it moving. That's, I think, what our focus should be on.
Okay,
Great.
Dan?
Another issue that we talked about was healthcare and the quagmire that is our healthcare system. We are partnering with Healthcare for All Minnesota on some legislative priorities to help solve this, so people don't have to rely on GoFundMe accounts to stay out of debt.
Yeah.
So it's a big problem, and if you want to talk about your goals for that issue, that would be terrific.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think that our access to healthcare can and should be improved. I am in favor of expanding Minnesota Care to cover more people. You know, in all parts of Minnesota, working people are asking for options outside of employer-funded insurance. And this is, you know, digital designers, design entrepreneurs, to people who want to expand our sustainable tourism industry, to our small family farms. Affordable access to healthcare is creating terrifying personal crises for too many people, and it's creating perverse economic incentives that hold back our economic growth. So the thing that I want to point out that is really crucial is that we have to improve, in order to improve healthcare, is that we have to update our reimbursement system. I actually think this is probably one of the very top level. So across our state, and particularly in the places that need providers the most, clinics are closing. Birthing centers are closing. This is very distressing. Just yesterday, I read about mass closures of drug addiction and mental health facilities across Minnesota despite high demand. And all of this is happening in large part because reimbursement rates are not keeping up with costs. You know, we can include every single person in a healthcare insurance system, but this really means nothing if people cannot access care because there are no providers. And already this is the case. You know, probably people on this call have experienced this. I am experiencing this right now in one of the wealthiest parts of the state. My son was just given a special needs diagnosis, and we are struggling to find, much less afford, the care that we need.
Thank you. I saw a question in here that I'd like to ask, and that is, do you advocate for Minnesota becoming a sanctuary state for illegal immigrants?
So I think that there is some confusion around what it means to be a sanctuary state. And if it is to function like it has already been functioning in the city of Minneapolis, then I am very supportive of that. My understanding of that and how, you know, that kind of a proposal for sanctuary state status means that law enforcement agencies focus on enforcing local and state laws and not on being agents for ICE. That does not mean that ICE cannot operate in Minnesota. That would not be constitutional, but it means that law enforcement officers would focus on enforcing our local and state laws and would not be required or asked to operate as ICE agents. Or pass that information along, because part of the problem, and this is what law enforcement partners have told us, our Hennepin County Sheriff, right, is supportive of this, that when they have to take down notes about who is an immigrant, who is legal, who is not legal, people stop talking. They can't do their job. They can't get testimony from victims. They can't go after people who are abusing their partners because their partners are terrified that they'll be deported and they won't have food for their children. Okay. So that's my understanding of the law that is being proposed, and that's what I would support. I think it would also apply to like schools, that we would not be asking immigration status, so that we could get children in schools no matter their immigration status.
Great. Do you support, and I know you're interested in the environment, but do you support the steps Governor Walz has taken to combat climate change?
So I'm very hopeful about what the governor and our legislature has achieved for climate action. As I've said, it's one of my top priorities, and I've been working on this since environmental policy related issues since the late 90s. Securing a clean energy network by 2040 is one of the most substantial commitments we have made. And now we have to send people to the state capitol who will ensure that we meet that commitment. So for Minnesotans, you know, this is an existential crisis. Will we be able to continue our way of life? Will we have winter? Will we have water for our 10,000 lakes? Will we maintain our forests? You know, it is an economic issue. How much will we have to pay to sustain life in the midst of an environmental catastrophe? Already, we have received a report from a state commission working to implement the new law, suggesting that we extend it to the target date of 2050. And luckily, our environmental partners like Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate and Sierra Club have pushed back, saying that we can meet that target by relying less on ethanol and move more aggressively on electrification. Things like electrification of our school buses, for example. We have local activists here in our district that are working to partner with the Edina Public Schools on. It hasn't happened yet, but they're hopeful. I want to point out one other thing. Even before the last legislative session, Governor Walz's administration oversaw the opening of our second largest solar panel manufacturing facility, and it's on the Iron Range. These are the kind of economic investments in clean energy jobs that I want to push forward, so that we can give new life to places currently dependent on industries that are making our climate incompatible with life as we know it. We can act to turn this crisis into opportunity. This is a message that I want to help send across our state. And finally, we have made commitments to plant more trees and to restore wetlands. The current goal is to restore 800 acres a year. I would like to bring a renewed emphasis on environmental oversight on land use to help us restore and maintain a balance that gives us the climate resilience we need.
Was there any legislation? I'm hopping around. by the
Sure,
way.
that's fine.
Was there any legislation that was passed in the last Minnesota session that you would have voted no?
So I think that we made some errors on the way that we wrote the SRO language. I went and reviewed policies that were recently changed and put into place in Minneapolis. Those kind of represent some of the best practices now that they've been forced to change. I read the restraint policies that apply in our correctional facilities. And the language that was used does not match what is in those places. And that caused a lot of confusion for our law enforcement partners. And I think that we could have done a better job working with somebody like Sheriff Witt in advance so that our aims and outcomes were aligned with each other.
What does SRO stand for?
The school resource officer. So these are officers that schools have who help kind of keep the peace, peacekeepers in the school. And different districts, this is a local issue. Some districts don't want them, and some districts like Edina do.
Okay. Jen, do you have any other questions you see in the chat?
I think we've covered all of the questions from the chat, and we'll be sharing with them, sharing those questions with you and Julie after this.
Right.
If you could put your email and website into the chat so people could click on them and send you questions directly if they have them.
Sure.
And
I'm going
then-
to change my view here. I did want to say that, people have listened a lot to me tonight, but this is a campaign that's really about deeply listening to others. And so I really encourage people to, reach out through my email. I am also going to be hosting candidate office hours. I have one this weekend, and people can learn more about those, the details of the candidate office hours, and can access my email if they don't get it here on that website, which is aliciagibson.com. We have caucuses coming up on February 27th that I hope everybody participates in and considers caucusing for me and volunteering to be a delegate at the April 20th endorsing convention.
Well, we have 5 minutes left. Does anybody can unmute yourself and ask Alicia a question? You went through those like lickety split, Alicia.
Sometimes I'm a little bit of fast speaker, so I apologize if I.
Anything more that you'd like to say?
I'm typing my.
Well, type, yes.
Yeah, there we go. So, this is also a campaign, I want to say, that is really focused on issues. I take it really seriously to do my homework so that I can be an independent evaluator as I work with partners, and then approach everything with a sense of curiosity to learn more from people after doing, as much research as I can, so that I know the kinds of questions to ask. I think that's very important. And then learn, where my blind spots are. So I would hope to be the kind of legislator that has really strong relationships with people in the community. And so I do hope that whether you agree with me or you do not agree with me, I already have some like that who are reaching out to me and ask me about different issues. Whether or not I agree on some things, please reach out to me because this is a campaign about building bridges, and that is the way that I want to govern too.
Thank you, Alicia. And now we're going to switch to Jen, and she's going to tell us about upcoming Indivisible Twin Cities events.
So just a reminder that I've put the link to our newly formed group that Colleen had mentioned, that we are Edina, Roseville, and St. Paul merging into Indivisible Twin Cities. So our website is there. We've got all sorts of information about the kinds of work that we have done. You'll see a lot of people that are very familiar to you, that you've been working with already. And we are forwarding because for the last 2 or 3 years, our bigger events, we've been working together already behind the scenes. We're just making it official. And we have some great upcoming events after this that I hope you'll all join us for. We've got one this Sunday. That's a video. We'll be talking about a video between Katie Couric and Heather Cox Richardson about democracy. And that's part of the IDC Books and More club that we do together. We have our twice a month, we have our action hours where we get together on Zoom and talk about legislation that's coming up and sending notes to our representatives. So Alicia, if you get through the election, you'll be getting emails from people and about all sorts of things that we care about. So they know what we care about and they work on it. So our next one, I believe, is in a couple weeks. Check that out. And then for those who are new to the caucusing process or have gone to one in the past and were like, what the heck? What is that? And why was that so chaotic? We have this is what democracy looks like, what to expect in the caucuses. And so it's a kind of a higher level view of what happens and why it's so important for people to attend. And then we will have someone teaching everybody how to write effective resolutions that on topics that you care about that you can bring to the caucus event on February 27th. Indivisible will also have pre-printed resolutions to bring on a variety, about 8 to 10 we're working on climate and women's rights and voting and healthcare and more. So you can kind of pick and choose and bring those to your caucus event and present those as well. It's going to be a really great event, and that's on February 20th in St. Louis Park at 6:30 p.m. So check out our events off of our website and sign up for those as well. And we are at 7:30 on the dot. Thank you so much,
Whoa.
Alicia, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That was terrific. And remember to sign up, Indivisible Twin Cities. Remember our new name. So
We have a new and improved newsletter too that you can also sign up for on the website.
things are just going great.
Collaboration is a great thing.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks so much for your time, everybody, and especially to Alicia and to Julie. Thank you.